Welcome to episode 10 of the Expert Cruise Show. I'm Anthony Davis, he's Chris Frame, and together it's our job to take you to sea. Now, I am actually at sea as we speak. I'm on board Queen Mary 2, the flagship of the Cunard line, and this is a photograph that I took on board yesterday, looking out to sea as we were whale watching. And Chris, you and I missed each other by about an hour because you were getting off Queen Mary 2 in New York City, or in Brooklyn, I should say, at the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal, as I was getting on. So we very nearly got to actually touch each other's flesh.
We actually had planned to catch up, but on the morning that we arrived into New York, at 5 o'clock in the morning, we got a text message from Delta Airlines saying that the flight that we were booked on has been quite significantly delayed. And we were looking at all the options, and because we're flying across from New York to California to go and see the Queen Mary, only had like 18 hours on board the ship. And the best option we actually found was to just leave the ship as soon as Queen Mary 2 docked, jump in a taxi, a very overpriced taxi, and race off to the airport. And on the way there, we actually managed to use Delta's free swap service to get on the flight that left at 9:30. And we got there and we got on the plane and we just left. So I was so disappointed to miss you and not have an opportunity to catch up in person for the first time.
Well, if it's any consolation, I could smell your cologne on board Queen Mary 2 that you'd left in a kind of waft as you exited with such gusto.
It really was.
But what was really sweet was that you kind of flew, transcontinental, landed in LA, and you board the original Queen Mary. This is the namesake, built 1936. Your first time on board, as I'm on board Queen Mary 2, and we're FaceTiming each other from one Queen Mary to another Queen Mary. Now, this might not seem even vaguely interesting to people that are not suffering from the same disease as you and I for the ocean liner, but for us it was nirvana. And next week we're going to do a special Expert Cruise Show episode about the original Queen Mary and your experience of being on her for the first time, considering you've been reading and writing about her since you were a kid. Yes,
it was. It takes a while to process. It's a kind of funny thing because we were doing some live streams from on board as well. I was traveling with my mate Luke, and we were just trying to sort of share the experience. But we actually ended up spending the whole first afternoon and evening just absorbing the ship. It was really, really difficult to put into words quite what it felt like for someone who has spent so much time researching this ship to finally step on board. And, we'll go into it next week because this week we've obviously got lots of other things to talk about. But it really did take, even now, just several days later, back home in Australia after that long flight, it's still quite hard to believe that actually happened. And I've finally actually been on board that ship where all those stories unfolded. But Anthony,
surreal.
You and I... Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is that Queen Mary 2 is such a worthy successor, and you and I have had plenty of conversations about the things that we love about cruising. And in fact, we've even had an episode on the Expert Cruise Show where we suggested maybe that there is a ship that's close to perfect, a cruise ship that's close to perfect. But I think after both of us having been back on Queen Mary 2, we could probably safely say that the Queen Mary 2 as an ocean liner and a bespoke design, one-off that doesn't exist anywhere else, she's perhaps the best passenger ship that is available out there.
Not in the cruise category because she's not a cruise. And I think that really is the differential. And I too had forgotten. I mean, I've been on her, this is my fourth time. And by the way, excuse my costume because I've just come back. It was a gala night tonight. And so I was in white tie and tails, as you can see, with a real bow tie, not a fake one. But this is my fourth time. So first time 2004, maiden crossing. Then I went on again in 2009, 2011. I popped on for an hour in 2016 to see the refit, just as a press trip. Now I'm back on as a passenger in 2025, and like you, I think I had romanticized in my mind a lot about the ship, but I guess I'd maybe confused some of my memories with Queen Elizabeth, Queen Victoria, and Queen Anne. Now that I'm back on the flagship of the Cunard line, and I'm actually going out of my way to kind of look at her through a different lens, I just feel this great sense of overwhelming joy. A, that she even exists in the first place, but B, that she really is the natural successor, not just to Queen Mary, but to the Normandy, and to the Mauritania, and to the Lusitania, and, even some of the kind of less famous Cunarders, the ocean liners. I think that's really the difference. And I feel this great hulk of steel that is thicker than any other ship currently in existence, that is more hardy, that is saying to the ocean, you just give me everything you've got. You are not slowing me down. It feels like we're in something that was purpose built for this occasion. And I am really very overjoyed about this experience. Cunard have done a wonderful job. I have no complaints. No complaints about anything. The food, the service, the quality, the condition of the ship. I mean, I'm sitting in my cabin right now, and obviously people sometimes don't believe. So I was thinking maybe I should just flash my background off for a second.
Yeah, do that.
Just so people can see that I am actually in the cabin. and just to kind of recognize that I am on board QM2 right now. And so hence my energy for I literally have just been in the pub with the captain about 10 minutes before we started recording this, while my wife was singing karaoke and we watched her together. And I mean, quite a surreal experience. So yeah, I mean, I think you and I are probably in agreement. This is arguably the greatest passenger ship ever built, and certainly the last at the moment of the ocean liners in service.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously sailed across the Atlantic, just the voyage rather, before yours, and it was just remarkable. I mean, the ship just didn't move, and I know it's a summer crossing, but we had a couple of nights where there was 7-8 meter seas, and she was just gliding through it as if it didn't really matter at all. And I think about other cruise ships I've sailed on in lesser conditions, and they definitely move around a lot more. Queen Mary 2 is just designed specifically for that passage. Probably the only ship that should be doing that direct passage on the Transatlantic, because she is specifically built for it. She's just remarkable. And we had as you know, we had the absolute pleasure of sailing across the Atlantic with Stephen Payne on board, the designer of Queen Mary 2. I shared the stage with him actually on the 185th anniversary voyage, and so we had this wonderful opportunity to spend some time with him on his ship and explore the QM2 through the lens of the designer, and to see how proud he is of his creation 21 years later. Absolutely justified in the pride he has for that ship, because if you're on board, I mean, I find it hard to believe, Anthony, that the ship is 21. She still feels like she's got tradition about her, but she's got this contemporary feel as well. There's a beautiful blend of modernity with the classic nature of the Queen Mary 2. The public spaces, I think, have aged really well, and the grandeur of the ship, the fact that they have 2 double height decks on deck 2 and deck 3 to make everything feel like it's lifted and it's grand and opulent. You're right, it does sort of link back to ships like Normandy. It links back to the original Queens. It links back to the old liners like the Coronia and the Carmania that were plying this trade. And of course, there's so much sort of as a nod to QE2 as well, that the ship is this beautiful blend, but yet is her own ship. She's just got this unique personality that I think's developed over time. I don't know if you found it the same, but when I first went on board, she was grand and beautiful and amazing, but she didn't have that like really depth of soul that she does now. She's grown into herself, and I think she gets better with age.
100%. And a lot of the feeling of a ship also comes down to its crew. And the people who are working on this ship are clearly so proud to be on this particular ship. And so, you're getting the flagship experience. And I don't know whether it's just a coincidence, but the food, we just did the maiden crossing of Queen Anne in January, and the food on this ship is so much better. It's so much more thoughtful. And I really can't can't fault it. But I was thinking about the double height and how it makes such a difference, especially like in stairwells. You know, you don't really think about stairwells ever. But here, they're so grand, and you look at them, and each one is like a grand staircase, even though it's just, you know, an A or, you know, a B or a C stairwell. It's really quite remarkable how the wood paneling, which is of course not real wood, but the quality of these kind of thick bespoke panels that where the wood changes, a little like on the original Queen Mary. There's like 30 odd different types of wood, ranging from Canadian maple to walnut, and you know, it really is a woody ship. This ship is the same. They've really taken those themes, and I guess for you, coming from Queen Mary 2 straight onto Queen Mary, you must have seen these moments where you're like, that's the same, especially in like the Britannia dining room on board this ship, drawing so much from the original Queen Mary. And you wouldn't know it if you didn't have that direct side-by-side comparison. But if it's fresh in your mind, I think it must be a very spiritual experience for an ocean liner enthusiast.
Yes, it you know, you go through the original Queen Mary, and it's interesting doing it in reverse, having been on the successor first, and for so many years, and I've got so much experience with Queen Mary 2. But then you go to the original Queen Mary, and like the light fixtures, for example, in the observation bar, and you can see that they've used that as a hint in places like illuminations, and also in the champagne bar, for example. The triple height nature of the Britannia restaurant against Queen Mary's first class main dining room, which we did get a glimpse into, even though it was closed to the public. They treated us very well on board the RMS Queen Mary. We got access to some places that most people wouldn't have on that particular day because they were preparing it for 4th of July. But we got to go and see all these different spaces on board. And then there's the differences as well. Like Queen Mary 2, if you stand at the bow of deck 5 and you look all the way to the stern, you can see all the way down because she's a modern ship. RMS Queen Mary, there's a sheer, there's a noticeable angle in the ship's hull, and so you see the floor disappear, deck disappear into the deckhead, which is little differences that you notice between the two ships. But what's also interesting is that Queen Mary 2 is so much bigger than the original Queen Mary, and there's so much more space. And you think, I did find it interesting to think that on that original ship, she carried up to 16,000 troops on board, and yet she is so much smaller in terms of dimensions than her successor, but also just modern day cruise ships. And we had one of the Costa by Carnival ships docked behind us that just dwarfed the Queen Mary, and QM2 is about that sort of size. So it was really interesting to see how much shipbuilding had changed, but also the nods that they'd taken from the original. But I think that's the thing that's, back to your point as well about the staircases. On Queen Mary 2, actually Stephen Payne was telling us that when they were building the ship, the regulations at the time required them to have the 4 staircases for the length of Queen Mary 2. And that allowed for the wonderful flow of passengers. There's not much in the way of bottlenecks on board. And each one of those stairwells, as you're aware, is a different color, a different kind of wood. So it ranges from the dark ones towards the forward end of the ship, right the way through to almost a yellowish color towards the D stairway. And that just helps you situate yourself, orientate yourself on board, which is really clever, I think.
It's very subtle. It's very subtle, but it works. This is an example of how quiet it is, sailing on Queen Mary 2. No people, no engine noise, no background music, no anything. Let's just talk about the passenger numbers versus the space ratio, because I think that's been the best thing, considering that we were just on the Celebrity Edge, which is, a similar sized ship, but with a whole lot more passengers. And here, because it was built 21 years ago, before the days of trying to upsell you into speciality restaurants and all that stuff. Almost all of the public spaces on board, apart from one dining room, i.e. the veranda grill, is a shared public space. And even the people who are in first class in the Queen's Grill and in Princess Grill, they use the ship in the same way, apart from just a small grills lounge, which I rarely see people in. The whole ship is, there is no ship within a ship, really. There's just a couple of dining rooms. And so the public areas are for everybody, and yet they never feel crowded. You're never crossing someone on a stairwell, hardly ever. Whereas, I was on Royal Caribbean recently, like waiting for people to come up the stairs before you can go down the stairs and all that stuff. And here it is just vast. It feels wider, it feels deeper. And so consequently, there is a kind of therapeutic element to being in a space that feels more exclusive. And I mentioned in our Transatlantic episode a couple of weeks back that I saw the Transatlantic on Queen Mary 2 advertised for $509. I actually posted an image of that on our Expert Cruise Show Instagram, because someone wrote and said, "Where do you see these prices?" Well, that was on the Cunard website, so I screen grabbed it. But if you, let's say hypothetically, you're paying $509 per person, it's about $1,000. You feel like you're in first class because of the space. And really, for me, as I said before, when I went on the retreat on the Celebrity Edge that seemed like pretty small and it didn't feel luxurious to me, here it's the opposite. The less you pay, the more you get. And we've talked before about the grandeur of the Britannia dining room as a steerage passenger. It really is that, all these things have been thought about. I mean, Steve Payne has confirmed that in interviews, that he wanted the cheapest ticket to still have access to all of these wonderful facilities and services. And really, apart from a solitary jacuzzi on the grill's terrace, everything else is accessible. Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things that really stands out about this ship. And they took notice of how Cunard had evolved, because, if you think back to that original Queen Mary, it was a 3-class ship. There was definitely, a much better standard of accommodation on board compared to previous ships, but you were kept in your areas on board the ship. As the jet aircraft became more and more dominant, people who wanted to travel by ship weren't interested in, steerage class going across the Atlantic when they could fly. So when they developed QE2, it was a 2-class ship on the Atlantic, but it could easily be turned into a 1-class ship for cruising, dual purpose, right? And so everything was built to the same sort of high standard to enable it to operate as a 1-class ship. You didn't have that obvious decrease in standard. Slight difference, obviously, in accommodation, but the shipboard experience was supposed to be pretty much the same across the 2 classes. Come along to Queen Mary 2. By this stage, of course, Cunard is operating as a 1-class experience, with the grills experience as that like extra special on top, but you still get access to the whole ship. And they decided to continue to do that with Queen Mary 2. And so she has this level of high quality fixtures and fittings throughout the entire ship, even down to the inside cabins, for example. The space is good for an inside cabin. The amenities that you have access to are good. You have access to a sitting area as well as a drawer, a table with some drawers and stuff. So there's multiple spaces within the accommodation, and you have access to the entire interior of the ship, with the exception of those very few selected grills only rooms that are hidden away. Like, they're not, you don't have to go through them or past them. That deck at the back, that's right, they're not it's not kind of rammed down your throat that you're missing out because you can't go into these places. And what I've seen, I mean, Queen's Grill is beautiful, of course it is, and the food is is made to order, and of course I get all that. But it really isn't necessary. It's just food. The joy of this trip, whether it be the Atlantic crossing or the trip that I'm on now, which is sailing from New York to Nova Scotia and back, is being at sea. And
I would also say that whilst the King's Court buffet is a little weird in terms of layout, we have discovered that the nooks and crannies of where to sit, because it's not laid out big and beautiful like a Edge class ship, is that it does feel a little bit cramped, but you can get nice little nook tables for two, and also you're basically sitting out on the promenade. I mean, to have the promenade on deck 7 right there, you can have your food and then you can go walk it off by stepping outside, or as we'd sometimes take our food and sit on the steamer chairs on the promenade deck and actually eat our lunch out looking out to sea outdoors. I mean, you can't do that on any other ship. It's just wonderful.
Yeah, actually, Stephen Payne was asked about that on Queen Mary 2. People often ask him, why is the buffet restaurant where it is? And he said that it's twofold. Firstly, you put the buffet right at the top of the ship. And, of course, that's the part of Queen Mary 2 is pretty stable, but that's the part that moves the most. On the Atlantic, that's not going to be great. But secondly, you need a space for passengers to muster if the ship ever had an incident. And they want to muster you indoors. They don't want to take you out onto the deck in the middle of an Atlantic storm. Yeah. And the best use of that space was to have the restaurant there, because that's a space that can absorb all the people that are going to be mustering on the ship. But I totally agree with you, the little interesting spaces that you find. And one of the things that I thought was really cool and was new this time to me is that the chef's galley, which is a nook on the starboard aft side of that restaurant, of the King's Court, it used to be used for live cooking demonstrations, but now it's sort of a bespoke cook-to-order sort of area. You can get burgers and that sort of thing there. But in the evenings, they set it up as its own little independent restaurant. And with no extra charge, you can go and get pastas and pizzas made cooked fresh to order. And they'll serve you, and there's a waiter there. And I was like, that is a really... we actually did that. And that's a really... Because sometimes we just don't feel like the grandeur of the food in the main dining room, especially if you're on for quite a while. It was a really nice little addition to the ship that is bucking the trend of asking for more money because it didn't cost anything extra, which is really cool.
I agree. They've created these little additional spaces, and they do feel like restaurants on their own when they dress them up at night. So it doesn't feel like you're in the kind of buffet space. The other thing I'd say is that, people complain about the shower curtain and the small showers and the small bathrooms. And as I said before on the show, I started to enjoy working around small spaces because then I really feel like I'm at sea. And if I was in a grand room, then I would feel like I was in a hotel on land. And so I don't want that. But I don't know if this is true, and I'm kind of asking you as a historian yourself, and maybe Stephen Payne did say this, but the showers are small because if you're on an Atlantic crossing and you get thrown around in the shower, they don't want you to fall over. You're better off just leaning against the wall. And there's a grab bar there on every shower. Is there some
I think it's a combination of things. I mean, I think that in 2004, when QM2 entered service, the bathroom size and scale and quality was of a very high standard, right? And if you go further up into the ship, it gets bigger. If you go into the Balmoral suite, which I've been very fortunate to have an opportunity to tour, I've never sailed in it, but tour it, the bathroom is the same size as an entertainer's cabin. It's huge. It's absolutely immense. There's a spa and there's a shower and there's all that sort of stuff. But, the cabins were designed, and they still are to this day, they're designed in a modular format. So each of those Britannia bathrooms is a module that's just put into the ship. It's kind of all connected up like giant Lego. And you can see, that there's a little kink out of the deck head there where the services are running for the previous cabin. So it's all got to sort of fit around itself. But, what I will say is that, and I'm vocally pro shower door, and, QE2 had shower doors after its 94 refit, so it is possible to retrofit older ships with shower doors. But with the exception of that, Queen Mary 2's bathrooms are better than the other Cunard queens, maybe with the exception of Queen Anne. But Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth, for example, don't have an adjustable shower head. It sticks out the wall. Queen Mary 2's is adjustable. The water pressure is amazing. For a 21-year-old ship, the water pressure is just so good.
I know. And also, we noticed there's no smell on this ship. We discussed on episode 1, I think, that some ships do stink a little bit, and this ship, from top to toe, it's like being in a hotel, a 5 or 6 star hotel. Really, you wouldn't know you were at sea unless you stuck your head out the window.
Yeah, they've taken all the drainage areas away from passenger, access. There is a few areas on deck where you can smell like the exhaust from the air conditionings, like blowing out, say, food smells, which you can sometimes get. But because it's on the promenade deck, if you're at sea and there's a wind blowing, it's pretty hard to notice. There's one little corridor next to the Queen's Grill where it's enclosed, where you can kind of pick up a whiff every now and then on the starboard side. But if you look at the ship from a technical point of view, it's drawing air in from the port side and then removing it from the starboard side. That's the way the air conditioning system, or HVAC, works. So, they've done a very good job at trying to make sure that the ship itself had a very high standard hotel on board. And you know what I also got a chance to see, Anthony, is that in 2016, they added some extra cabins, some single cabins to the ship. And one of the people that I've met on previous trips, but she's also a subscriber on the channel, her name's Leslie, and she was traveling in a single cabin, and she asked if we'd like to have a look at what the 2016 design looked like. And it's got this massive window where the casino used to be. Mm-hmm. It's the quality, I put pictures up now, but the quality of the fixtures and fittings are superb. And those rooms have showers with shower doors. So I think that in a future refit, they'll most likely do that to Queen Mary 2 to bring the bathrooms up to the standard that the rest of the ship is, because I think she refurbishes very well, and she doesn't require that much work, really. Like, I mean, if you think about the interior, the thing that made Queen Mary 2 so special when they built her, I mean, she cost $800 million, and then there's an extra 200 or so million in terms of fit out and design work and planning and prep and marketing, all that sort of stuff. So it's $1 billion ship. And they added things in, like they had Canyon Ranch design the spa complex, which is immense. It's huge compared to other spa complexes, and it still holds its own. They had the planetarium, which I know gets mixed reviews, but if they just put a few more shows on, it's just superb to have that option of that dome coming down and having that planetarium experience.
We went to the planetarium a couple of days ago. As you say, there is a kind of surreal feeling about a kind of lying back in these chairs, which have all been refurbished, by the way, in 2023. And watching the show, it could have been louder. My only criticism was it wasn't loud enough. You need to be immersed, not just visually, but audibly as well. And also I think that the projectors maybe are not as powerful as they were, or maybe they need new bulbs or something, because the image wasn't as bright as I was expecting. But aside from that, it was just a surreal experience to be on a ship in a planetarium. And I don't think any other ship has tried to do a planetarium. It is a real luxury. People were fighting for tickets as well to get in. I mean, really, they were literally pushing and shoving to get the last few remaining seats. But this is the thing about being on a transatlantic liner, is that they have created stuff to do on board, such as going to the planetarium, having 2 theatres back to back, the Royal Court and the Illuminations, means that you can run 2 lectures simultaneously, or that you can show a movie in one and a show in the other. It's very clever that because it's a transatlantic liner, it has inbuilt additional activities. And so a cruise ship, whilst it might have water slides, it's not designed for kind of indoor rough weather activities. And actually on a regular cruise ship, when the weather is bad, it gets crazy busy inside, and there really isn't that much to do. Whereas it's the opposite on this ship. All the good stuff is inside. In fact, if you go outside onto the top, and I love the fact that there's nothing. It's so interesting to me that there's these huge spaces of open deck and antique boards. Now, in 2016, obviously, they did add these cabins to create a deck 13, and these are Britannia Club cabins, and that is, as I said previously, I mean, that is so high up. I would never recommend being that high. I'm on deck 4, just kind of aft of midship. So I'm just above the Britannia dining room, which is the kind of midpoint. So I'm actually in the perfect place for rough weather. We haven't had any rough weather, but I prefer these cutout balconies because they're larger than the open balconies that start on, I think they start on what, deck 8 and above?
8, yeah.
But here on down on decks 4 and 5 and 6, you get these cutouts which have drainage. So if water was to come in, the seawater would just drain out down the side of the ship. I've got some photos which we can put up that I took of those from the outside today, and you're afforded a lot more space. Most of the cabins on Queen Mary 2, and this is where it differs from the newer ships, most of the cabins are the same. They're just on higher decks, so you pay more if you want to be up high, which doesn't make sense to me. Again, it's kind of upside down, but the actual cabins are identical. And so it's only if you go into Princess and Queen's Grill do you get a different cabin. Even if you are in Britannia Club, the cabin is identical. And so it's very interesting, isn't it, that a ship that was built 21 years ago specifically for the Atlantic crossing actually offers you, even if you're not using it for the Atlantic crossing, a whole lot more than a regular cruise ship does.
Absolutely. I think that point you made about everything being indoors, like she's designed for winter conditions, right? So everything focuses on the indoor activities, which means that when everyone, the whole ship's complement is inside, there's space for everyone, which is remarkable. I mean, she has 2 open air swimming pools towards the aft. She's got these beautiful terraced aft decks, which are there not just for aesthetic purposes, but also stability purposes. To have the ship in that sort of wedding cake shape helps with the way she handles the Atlantic. But there's also an indoor-outdoor swimming pool just forward of the funnel. And in all my years with Queen Mary 2, I've only ever seen the glass roof open once, back in 2020, just before the world shut down. So I don't want to see it open again. But, it's a full-size swimming pool with 2 jacuzzis and a bar that's got the closed glass roof, and it's warm and it's available regardless of the weather. We were sailing through fog. We tried the outdoor pool. It was freezing. We went to the indoor pool. It was just gorgeous. And so they've thought about these sorts of things to make sure that you can access the different activities regardless of the weather conditions, which I think is really cool. And one of the things it links back to the heritage as well, in that when they were looking at Queen Mary 2, they learnt from QE2, and QE2 was from an era where the cabins weren't all standardized, and it almost looked on the deck plans like they'd said, we need 963 cabins, just figure it out, because they were all different shapes and sizes. The configurations were all over the place. It was interesting when you booked to see what you got, but for most people, they don't like that level of uncertainty. So Queen Mary 2 is very much like, if you have a Britannia room, you know what it's going to look like. And I think people like that, and I think it's aged well as well, because it can be easily refurbished.
Yes. Well, it's a good size as well. These rooms are just short of 200 square foot, plus the balcony, and our balcony is, I think, around 60 square feet. It's crazy that you get such a big balcony in these cutouts. Slightly smaller balcony in the glass fronted ones up above, and deck 8 above. But yeah, I mean, the carpet has changed maybe 4 times since I've known this ship, right? It started off with a kind of gold-coloured carpet. Then they made this terrible mistake and went to a brown carpet with a swirl in the bedrooms, which was just like, oh, what are you doing? Then they went back to a gold carpet, and now we've got this kind of 2-tone carpet again, which I think went in 2023, and it's very classy. They also added these headboards, or above the headboard in the bedrooms, they added this padded section with mirrors either side. A very simple upgrade, and it's made a huge difference to the rooms. Made it seem much more upscale. They replaced the lamps by the bed and either side of the mirror. Again, kept within the Art Deco style. It's very simple, and even the light-coloured woods, I'm looking across to the wardrobes, they have held up very well. There's no damage or scratching for a 21-year-old ship. And again, in 2023, they replaced all the televisions as well with these new Samsung flat screen TVs on the walls, which are really very good. And the best thing about them is they don't seem to have the noise cancelling thing activated. Have you ever noticed this when you watch either hotel or cruise ship TVs? They've got all these settings turned on that make everything look like it's a kind of studio.
Oh yes, they've set it to the wrong setting. Yeah,
it kind of creates a sheen to everything. Yeah, and so they have all this kind of noise reduction on, and it means that you're, try and watch a movie, Titanic ideally, and it just looks like a TV show. And so I'm so thrilled. I mean, it seems like a small minutiae, but I'm so pleased on these new TVs. They haven't turned on any of that kind of noise reduction stuff, which means that you can actually watch things. So the upgrades, the small upgrades are really great. And of course, being a British ship, we have British plug sockets and American plug sockets. We have tea and coffee making facilities. We have some nice cups as well. Look at this. This is Wedgwood. Wedgwood, right? It's a proper British porcelain brand. And they've given us proper tea as well. That's the other thing of traveling on Cunard, is that you get Twinings, not Bigelow or Lipton's, and some biscuits as well. So I couldn't be happier right now.
It's interesting actually, because when Queen Mary 2 first entered service, there was no tea and coffee in the rooms, and the dresses had she introduced, and you might remember from 2004, an interactive television system, and it was these big fat back TVs that had there's a drawer that is still there, a little drawer that pulls out. There was a keyboard there, and you could exactly, that's what I was going to say. They repurposed it quite well. So that used to have the keyboard in it, and the TV was used to make. You could email you could message at the cabins. You could email people from home. You got a QM2 email address, and all these quirky things. Right. Ultimately, the world's moved on, but because of that, because of the fact that they've had this space built into the dresses where that big fat television used to sit, that's now used for the tea and coffee making facilities. Which means on this ship, it doesn't feel like it's just crammed in there. Whereas on other ships, even within the Cunard fleet, when they added the tea and coffee, it sort of sits there on the dresser and it's like taking up space, and it doesn't really make much sense. Queen Mary 2 has got all this space because they've repurposed things quite thoughtfully on board, which I thought was quite good.
That's right. I think some of the other ships put the tea and coffee in the wardrobe.
Exactly. Which isn't much use. But again, after 10 o'clock, room service in the Britannia rooms now has a charge. A lot of people used to use the room service just to call in for tea back in the day, but you can make your own now, so it reduces that reliance on those sorts of things.
Yes.
And the breakfast in bed service, I must say, you convinced me. We'd be woken up each morning with a knock on the door, and it was tea and coffee, and my mate Luke, who I was traveling with, he liked a couple of pastries in the morning, so they'd deliver that, and that gave us the fuel we needed to actually wake up and get going before going up.
So are you saying you actually took my advice from previous episodes and said that you must take advantage of the free delivery breakfast service, because why not? Just because you can.
Can I give you another reason why I took your advice?
Go ahead.
Is because on the Atlantic, the clocks changed 5 times, and so to make sure that we got it right, we ordered tea at 8 o'clock.
That's very clever. Well,
because I know the ship was going to be right. Yeah,
we've been getting breakfast delivered at 9:30 every morning, pretty much. Only this morning we didn't get it delivered, but it is, like I say, it's free. Take advantage of it. It's a luxurious thing that you will never get at home unless you live in a hotel, and so it's definitely worth starting the day, even with a light breakfast, and then go off and have your bigger breakfast. But I would also remind people that because the Britannia dining room is open for 3 meals a day on sea days, it's definitely worth trying to use that room, especially because it's open seating for breakfast and lunch, so you're going to end up sitting in different places. And I'd forgotten how grand that dining room is. It's nothing like the Britannia dining rooms on the other Cunard cruise ships. It is a whole thing all on its own. And I also took a photo, which we'll put up, an image of the secret passageway between or behind the
mural.
What is that piece of artwork that hangs?
Oh, it's actually a tapestry. Sorry, it's a tapestry.
It's a tapestry. That's what I thought. Yeah, it looks like it's fabric, right? But behind it, there's a secret passageway that goes on the upper deck that goes from left to right. I was saying to my wife, isn't it wonderful that they've lined the inside of this secret corridor with this studding wood as well? They didn't go, oh, well, this is crew area, so therefore we'll just make a utilitarian kind of plain white wall or something. The wood paneling extends all the way around, and so when passengers are walking past and looking, it looks like it's very much part of the ship, and it's that attention to detail. That's why the ship cost $1 billion back in 2023, is because they thought of everything. I did want to mention how they've captured the Art Deco design and done a whole kind of new thing with it. We touched on it, you mentioning those beautiful lamps outside, illuminations, and in the champagne bar. But generally and everywhere, it's an Art Deco kind of classic experience that is never going to age. That's what's so great about it, is that they haven't kind of gone for exact Art Deco, but I don't know who the designers were. I wasn't that kind of conscious of it all in 2004, and we didn't have social media to kind of do daily vlogs and have the architects kind of being interviewed in detail about it. But how on earth have they designed this ship to be a kind of successor to QE2 and Queen Mary, bring all these things in, make it feel fresh and new and vibrant and not dated and completely classic, but a new version of classic? I think it is very well observed, and I wouldn't even know where to begin to do something that well. And maybe the grand staircase in the lobby is probably the best example of something that you feel is old, like there's a lot of nostalgia associated with it, and yet if you analyze the design, it's entirely modern.
Coming onto the channel soon, because I did a sit-down Q&A with Stephen Payne for the passengers on the Transatlantic crossing, and we thought it would be fun to do. Basically, it was the rehearsal of that, but we filmed it for YouTube. And Stephen talks about how he gave parts of the ship to the designer. So he, for example, created the space for the Britannia restaurant with the general layout and the staircase and the space where the tapestry would go. But then he handed it over to the design house who did that work. He explains that in quite a lot of detail, but it's quite something to think of. Various design firms, and then you had consultants such as Canyon Ranch getting involved in certain parts of the ship. They all had to work together in harmony to create something that is coherent. And I think in a funny way, the 2016 refit, which is the ship's biggest internal refurbishment, it took what had already been there and worked, and it just enhanced certain areas of it. So say, for example, the Corinthia Lounge, which I'm sure on your trips is as popular as on mine. It's on deck 7. It's the cafe. It's just busy all the time.
Oh, people love it.
Love it.
And when I was first in there, when it was the Winter Garden, no one was in there.
No. But there's two things about that, right? They lightened the space, which I think makes it feel more inviting, but they also activated the bar and put a cafe in there. And I think if you put coffee in a place, people will come, right? So they just learnt from how the ship had been operating and really refined it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, with the exception of the Corinthia Lounge and the King's Court, which has been reorganised, the ship is pretty much in the same configuration as it was in 2004, and I don't see any immediate need to change much about the way that she is operating. She's a very successful design, and with complaints about Deck 3L and the hidden corridors aside, you figure it out. Afternoon tea is never empty, so people can find the Queen's Room. And so the thing is, there's enough motivation, right? You want a scone, you're gonna find anything. So the ship is very successful, but you have to remember, and you know this as well as I do, that she's built for the Atlantic. She's not built just for the cruising. So she goes cruising, but she's not designed to be a cruise ship. She's designed to do that transatlantic crossing. And when you do those colder weather voyages on board this ship, it just comes into its own, and it is the reason why if you want to do a cruise in winter and QM2 is nearby, you should choose QM2 because she's designed to be a cold weather passenger ship. She can cruise comfortably in winter as well as do the transatlantic crossings whenever she does them. So
I am so thrilled to be back on this ship, and I now know that I'm going to go out of my way to try and book her as often as I can, because there is so much added value to be on Queen Mary 2. And I'd say the biggest one is the grandeur, the kind of majesty of this ocean liner as a vessel, as a bespoke vessel that is not an off-the-peg cruise ship from a shipyard, that there is only one of her, and that gives her a unique personality that you just don't get on kind of regular cruise ships. But also the fact that there is so much space for the number of passengers, 2,500 passengers, and on a 150,000 ton ship. I mean, it's just wonderful. And so as much as I love other passengers, I don't want to be tripping over them necessarily. And so that's what makes it feel like it's more of an exclusive product. And so, obviously we love the heritage, but we don't hesitate to recommend this ship wherever it's going.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I spend a lot of time on board as a guest speaker working with Cunard, but have traveled as a passenger many times, particularly before I started doing the guest lecturing. The reason why I choose QM2 over and over and over again, because you get offered various different ships across various different itineraries, and Queen Mary 2's itineraries, in terms of the route she goes, might be a little bit more repetitive than some of the other ships. But the reason why I choose this ship is because once you've finished, I mean, not only is it just remarkable to lecture in Illuminations or in the Royal Court Theatre and have a full house, because people who are on board love the history, that's why they're there, but also the rest of the ship is just an experience that is unlike any other, and she's a cut above, I think, all other passenger ships because of that. And she just has a story that's so unique, a heritage that she continues that is so special, a role that is so bespoke, and as a transatlantic liner, but also she is absolutely the worthy ocean liner to succeed ships like QE2, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, Aquitania, Normandy. She is the sort of epitome of ocean liners and has so far become extremely successful. She's adapted to a changing world, and she is able to operate successfully and profitably in the age of the jet and modern technology. So here's to many more years of this ship, Anthony.
And let's hope she's never used as a troop ship, because they'd probably be able to get nearer 35,000 troops on board this ship, marveling at the vast public spaces.
Actually, on that point, in my lecture on board Queen Mary 2 about the original Cunard Queens, and we talk about Queen Mary carrying 16,683 troops or people on that crossing, I did say, that's the most people ever travelled on a ship. Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth are the world's largest troop carriers in history. Let us hope that that's where it stops, because to think of ships of the scale we have now being used for military purpose would be the most unbelievably devastating conflict if you're requiring ships like that. So here's hoping that that the records that the old queens hold will never get broken.
Let's hope so. Okay. Thanks for joining the Expert Cruise Show. Follow us on Instagram and wherever you can, find us. Share the show. It's available as an audio podcast as well as a YouTube show. And we'll come back next week and bring you more expert cruise knowledge. Thanks a lot, Chris. See you next week.
Thank you.